Welcome. We are very thrilled to have you join us today for what promises to be an insightful and inspiring discussion, breaking barriers, examining women's success in traditional male fields. Almost exactly 5 years ago, Vice President of Marketing Communications, Kelly Pfeiffer, and I had this exact event planned and ready to go, and then the whole world shut down for COVID. So we're very excited to be able to make this happen today and see it come to life. Today we will delve into stories of remarkable women who have not only navigated but also excelled in sectors historically dominated by men. We'll explore their journeys, the challenges they've overcome, their triumphs, and the invaluable lessons they've learned along the way. We're here to celebrate their resilience, their expertise, and their unwavering determination to pave the way for future generations. These women are not just breaking barriers, they're redefining the landscape of their respective industries. To guide us through this important conversation, we have an exceptional moderator, Tracy Davidson, NBC10 journalist, and a proud member of our Manor College Board of Trustees, whose experience and passion for empowering women will undoubtedly lead to a thought-provoking dialogue. And of course, we are privileged to have 4 outstanding panelists, each a trailblazer in her own right. We have Dr. Brenda Roselle, Vice President and Lead Technical Program Manager. Kristin Hillsley, a Senior Vice President at Baird Foley Hillsley Group. Nikki Johnson Alfano, tax attorney at her very own law firm, the Law Office of Nikki Johnson Huston, LLC. And Cathryn Antonacio, Strategic Partnerships and Fundraising Coordinator for the Eagles Autism Foundation at the Philadelphia Eagles. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to our esteemed moderator and panelists. Let's embark on a journey of discovery and inspiration as we learn from their experiences and celebrate their remarkable achievements.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to see all of you here. To students who are here, let me just say that what we're about to give you, in my opinion, is like a present. It is free, it is beautiful, it is wrapped up in a bow, and this is for you. And I think if I asked any of these women here, they would say, I would have loved it if somebody gave me this present when I was your age. Because this is free information and inspiration, and these women are you, and you are these women. Don't think that they're doing something right now that you won't be able to do when you get to their age. So let's unwrap the present. Brenda, let's start with you. Tell me how you got into the business that you're in.
Well, I have to go back to high school. I have to start back to high school. I was in my senior year, and the high school I attended in Philadelphia had a data center. And my advisor said to me that I needed to fill up my schedule. I could not just leave after 2 classes. So that's how I got started in technology. And after that, what happened was I actually, upon getting my degree at that time, you didn't only have to have a degree, you had to have experience. So I was in a catch-22. So what I did was I actually went to a technical school for a full year, 5 days a week, 5 hours a night, which was hands-on training. And that allowed me to enter into technology.
All right, let's start with you, Kristin, and go to you now. Because all of these we talk about non-traditional or more traditionally male. We have tech, financial, law, sports. All of these women, if you just saw their title, you would think traditionally male. So Kristin, talk us about your career and how you got started.
Well, I remember my first day that I walked into my office, and I was the only woman advisor, and I was about 20 years younger than everyone else, and I was just like, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. And I just remember the biggest producer in the office at the time, I remember he said, oh, you know, it's really, because I was like, I'm like help women make good financial decisions. Like, I'm gonna go help women and empower women. And he was like, well, just make sure that when it's time to sign paperwork, that their husband or father or uncle is in the room so that they can sign the documents. And I just remember wanting to like fall on the floor and be like, this industry needs to change. We need more women here, or we need less people like this particular person. But I think like when I thought about coming here today, bestowing advice, I think that one of the most important things is like finding what you're passionate about. Because I remember when I graduated college, I was going to go to medical school after, and then pivoted my junior year. So I ended up graduating with a degree in communications and a minor in biology and philosophy. And my dad was
nice
like,
for you.
awesome, money well spent. So I ended up I was working at Mainline Health, and I loved it there. But they helped me go get my MBA because I thought maybe I wanted to do something in marketing. And I remember when I had to take a finance class. I did not want to. And I remember being in the class and we were trying to figure out how much you would have to save each month for 5 years for your baby that was just born to go to college in 18 years. And I remember, now this might be me being naive, but I remember thinking like, you can just do that with math? Like, why doesn't everyone do that? Like, we would all be a lot happier. And I just reflected back on my own childhood with how my parents handled money, thinking, wait, why didn't they do that? And I remember money being contentious at certain times, volatile conversations at certain times. And I remember thinking, if I can dedicate my life to learning how this works, I could make a lot of people really happy. And so what's weird is I never thought about it as being male-dominated until I walked through the doors that day and I was like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. So.
What did you do, being first day and that person says, make sure that they have their husbands or brothers with them to sign off on it?
That made me sick to my stomach, really, and it just made me fight harder.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely been a fight this whole time, but it was one well worth fighting for because of all the women in this room and everyone I've been able to help.
Yeah, sometimes I say you have to be in the game if you want to fight for what's happening. You can't just say I'm not going to play because the rules are not fair right now. You have to get in. Nikki, talk about your start in the law profession.
So I am a tax lawyer, and just to, if we're going to talk about whether it's male dominated or not, only about 5 to 10% of tax lawyers are women, and only 1% of tax lawyers are black in this country. So I'm in the top 1% of what it is that I do. I always wanted to be a lawyer, but to be honest, I didn't come from any kind of privilege. I didn't grow up knowing lawyers other than kind of if someone in my family had negative interactions and needed a criminal lawyer. That's kind of the context I knew them in. But I grew up very poor, and for me, lawyers represented people who could speak for people who didn't have a voice, and they seemed to be able to navigate the system, and that seemed like that was an important skill that I wanted to have, and I felt like my family needed to have, to be able to speak up for ourselves and to get to where it is that we wanted to be. So I never wanted to be anything else but a lawyer. When I got to law school, I took a tax class, and I ended up realizing that I had such a love for tax, which is pretty unusual for people to decide, but there are two things in life that we can all be pretty sure of. They say death and taxes, and so I'm always going to have a job. What I love about my job is prior to starting, I've had my own law practice for about 10 years, but prior to starting my own law practice, I worked for the city solicitor's office, and I was able to help small businesses who weren't very sophisticated but had really great business ideas figure out how they needed to meet their tax liability and also to grow their business. So the ability to be able to educate people was really important. And what I will say, I find that for me, probably less of it has to do with me being female, and more of the challenges I've run into really has been being a Black female. And I'll give you a story. When I had maybe my first month of being an assistant city solicitor, I was in the major tax unit, so it meant that I dealt with high value cases. And I remember walking to a room for a negotiation with an older white male partner from a big law firm. And I sat down with him, introduced myself, and we start the conversation. And he stops me and he looks at me and he said, "What makes you think you're qualified to be a tax lawyer?" And I said, "My JD, my law degree, my MBA, and my master's in tax that I got at the same time in 4 years. How about you?" And he goes, "Oh." And then he said, "Well, where did you go to law school?" And I said, "Temple." And he goes, "Oh, I went to Temple." And we kept going, we kept going. And then he says, "Look, little girl, I've been doing this since you were in diapers." And in my mind, I was like, "Oh no, he didn't." And then I looked at him and I said, "Look, old man, you're closer to being in diapers than I am. And I'm an attorney just like you, and you will respect me, so I'm gonna need you to get the hell out of my office." And he was like, "Oh my gosh." And he walked out, and I told my supervisor, who was a man himself, and he was very shocked by this. But the next day, I got a call. The attorney apologized, and he said to me, "That was a pretty good comeback. We settled the case. We settled several cases over the life of my career. And when I left the city solicitor's office to open my own practice, he sent me clients." And so what I want you to take for that story is that how you may present, you may be younger, you may be a minority, you may be a woman, people are going to test you, and you should be prepared for that. But understand that you're getting a good education, have faith in yourself, that they are going to respect you in terms of having your boundaries, and that good work will show itself. And once people get past that, you can have a career. So don't let other people's expectations make you smaller. Make them understand who they are dealing with.
Love it. Cathryn, you want to tell us how you got started?
So I feel a little bit not as accomplished as these incredible women on stage right now because I'm still post-grad. But my story, I went to high school locally around here in Montgomery County. I went to Mount St. Joe's. I was a rower there. I got recruited Division I to go row at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. So I was there for 4 years. Once I graduated, I got the job as an associate at the Eagles. So essentially each department at the Eagles hires 2 to 3 post-grad, kind of like intern programs, so you're full-time for 1 full year. So you get to go through the full season. So I was in premium sales for that. So selling suites, selling club seats, hammering the phones, hammering the emails, client events, you name it, lots of hours. That wrapped up in like March, I would say. The off-the-field initiative for the Eagles is the Eagles Autism Foundation. And that was started by our owner and CEO, Jeffrey Lurie. So his brother's actually on the spectrum. That's our off-the-field initiative. And they are a very small team. We are 9 women running a foundation for Jeffrey, for the team. And they needed help. So once I was in premium, they were like, "Hey, you can stick on and like answer the phone, help with events." And I was working for our executive director, Ryan Hammond, who is also local around here. And yeah, I stuck on there, and that was probably like a month and a half. We did Eagles Autism Challenge, which is the 5K, the 10-mile bike ride, and the 30-mile bike ride event that all the Eagles players do, all of the front office participate in, and every dollar is put towards autism research and care programs. So it really is what the organization stands behind, and everyone is supporting it, so everyone comes out on that day. I think Nick Sirianni and his family do the 5K walk. We have a sensory walk, and all the players, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Mailata, everyone does the 10-mile bike ride. So I helped out with that 2-day event, and I made an impression on our boss. She hired me full-time to kind of cover a gap that the foundation was missing. So I oversee all of the sponsorship for Eagles Autism Challenge, as well as being a bridge between Eagles corporate sponsorships, connecting those huge, large companies to the foundation to get them involved. So my title is Strategic Partnerships and Fundraising Coordinator. So I handle all of our events as well. So if you see a flyer that's at a bar on a Saturday that's doing $1 per drink, that's going to EAF, that's me. It can be a roundup campaign at Red Robin, anything under the sun like that. So it's a very, very unique role, and it's very fun, but I've been at the Eagles for 3 years. So 2 Super Bowls in 3 years is pretty great. We've won one of them. That's a little bit about me.
Tell me what we've been talking about passion, find your passion, and then I would say don't let anybody get in your way. How does this align with your passion, your job?
Yeah, I always knew, going to a big SEC school, I knew I wanted to do something in sports. So once I got the job at the Eagles, I was like, this is great. I love it. It's definitely a you keep going job. It's a lot of events, a lot of weekends. I never thought I'd be working for a nonprofit ever in my life, but truthfully, seeing the impact that we're making in the community, and for me, raising lots of dollars through events is something that I'm very passionate about, and just seeing the impact and the smiles on everyone's faces is so fun to see for me. So last year we did an event at Dorney Park. So they donated all of the tickets to Eagles Autism Foundation, and we had Britton Covey and Reed Blankenship go out and ride roller coasters for the event. We had our cheer team there. Swoop actually rode all of the roller coasters, and he had a blast. He did fit on them, so don't worry about that. And then I did not mention, so the foundation also has 30 neurodiverse individuals who work every single event at Lincoln Financial Field. So we have a neurodiverse game day staff who we help support throughout the season, and our board certified behavioral analyst, Kristin Saracini, oversees that initiative. So she's providing visual schedules for game days. This is where I'm parking, this is where I'm stationed at, I'm a ticket taker type of thing. So we invited all of our game day staff out for the Dorney Park event, and just seeing the smiles on their faces is so incredible to just see an event that I work so hard on all throughout the year, and putting the smiles on everyone's faces is really fun. But definitely seeing the impact that we're making.
I love that. Nikki and Kristin already talked about, I'm going to look to you, Brenda. They've already talked about some adversity that they face, attitudes that they face. Can you talk about some adversity that you face? Because I know you like to talk about no, not what. I'm sure you've heard a lot of no's.
Yes, I have. So one example that I want to give is when I was initially, I would say, a freshman in the technology sector, I worked for an IT audit group. And what happened was I saw a need to convert manual effort into technology. So what I did on my own time, on the weekends, I actually created a new application that would make an audit more quicker. And so at the time, I presented it to my manager, and he said, oh, good idea, good idea. I presented it to his manager, good idea, good idea. So what happened was, I was pregnant at the time, and I was about to go out on maternity leave, and they had hired a gentleman to come in to work with me. So upon me going out on maternity leave and coming back, I found out he was promoted over me. So keep in mind that I was there longer, excellent reviews, developed an application which they, to my knowledge, was still using 10, 15 years after I left. So I went to my manager, who was an older gentleman, and I'm very forthcoming. I want to know why he was promoted over me. Well, he just got married, and he just had a baby and just bought a house. I said, I'm married, I just had a baby, and we just bought a house. Well, he was in the mindset that I was taking a man's job. So I went to his boss, very diplomatically, stated my case. He said, well, there really isn't much I can do because the head of the division is his best friend. So what I did was, because I knew I had the experience, I actually knew it was time for me to leave. So some no's that you can turn into yeses, but I knew that no, it would still be a no. So actually when I left the organization, it was the best decision that I made, because I ended up going to a software development company, one of the largest in the world. But that allowed me to realize that it wasn't me that was in a deficit. I should have gotten that promotion, I know that, but I knew it was time for me to leave. So I took that to me to drive me. Because my personality is, if you tell me no, and I know I can do it, I'm going to do it anyway. So that was a lesson for me.
Yeah, I want Nikki to jump out of this because she's heard a no and had to decide that same what to do next.
Yes, so the job I had prior to starting my own practice, you know, part of when I started was kind of during the last economic downturn. So there was a hiring freeze, there was a raise freeze, but I really was putting in the work. I was making a name for myself outside of what I was just doing for my employer, and that's something that I would really talk to you about when you're in any position. There's a difference between your job and your career. And your job is what someone pays you to do. Your career is the larger what the world thinks of you. And it's something that you need to really invest in. And so I was investing in myself outside of that position, which I think was really good for me. And we got to a point where I was like, I really want to be promoted. I kept getting put off. I said, I'll take the promotion even without the pay. I just want to feel like I'm moving forward. They just weren't willing to move on that. And I had to make a decision about how I wanted to move forward. And I just decided for me, I was done asking for a place at a table. I was going to build my own table. And I just think that that's really important in terms from a sense of empowerment. And I also want to just address about adversity because I kind of buried the lead a little bit. Getting to even wanting to go to law school was really important. What I didn't say is that I am the daughter of a drug addict and a single mother. That ended up putting my family on the streets when I was about 9 years old, and we lived on the streets for about a year. And I was sent to then go live with my grandmother. Because I'd been out of school for so long, I was going to be held back, and my grandmother advocated for me. And instead of being held back, I actually was tested. She told them to test me. And I tested gifted in math and English. And instead of being put the label of being a homeless kid, I got put the label of being a gifted kid. And I don't know that I was necessarily gifted, but it changed how I saw myself, and it changed how the rest of the world saw me. And I think that it very much put me in a place to be able to go to law school. But being first generation is just not very easy. And so I got a scholarship to college. That's how I ended up. I grew up in California. That's how I ended up here in Philadelphia. I got a scholarship to St. Joseph's University. I very much struggled. After my first semester, I was put on academic probation, and after my first year, I was actually academically dismissed and kicked out of school. And I was fortunate enough to end up getting a job on the main line as a live-in nanny for a wealthy family of lawyers. St. Joe's took me back in their night school program, and I ended up graduating from the same school that I failed out of previously. So I want people to take from my story, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And some of you may be able to relate to this story. So I got kicked out of college and lost my scholarship, and I'm still sitting here as a lawyer, and I went back, and I was actually one of the first people in the history of Temple to graduate with a law degree, an MBA, and a master's in tax in 4 years. So you can have issues that come up, you can have challenges that can come up, and you can still overcome them. And the difference between me and you is I'm just older than you. But with the right support, you can be sitting here figuring out what your version of the American dream is.
Thank you, and I especially like that your career is not your job is not your career, and you are the CEO of your career. You get to make those decisions. Kristin, I'm going to ask you about the adversity that you face, and we should give her some healing power, send her some healing vibes, because she is dealing with a cold and she is here with us. Talk to us about some of the adversity that you faced, besides that gentleman the first day.
Well, I think that one of I think there's like two challenging things that I have gone through. The one is the major one, and then the second is complacency. So I just want to like maybe put a little pin in that, because I think we go through life and sometimes we can become complacent, and we're sort of talking about struggles, and sometimes struggles that we go through are voluntary and we have to deal with them. And sometimes struggles are just staying in your comfort zone and not moving forward. But I think for me, your story about being pregnant and having someone do something not so great to you, it resonated with me because I had a business partner. I thought he was like the nicest man ever. I'm also very naive, I guess. And then, so I started my partnership with him in 2005. I had my son in December of 2010, and then they didn't have a maternity leave. You know, like it was just sort of like, come back. And I remember like putting a little maternity leave out of office, and they were like, why did you do that? And I was like, oh, okay, I'll just be back then. You know, and I didn't have enough confidence at that time to advocate for myself. So I would say that, like, whenever you can, make sure to advocate for yourself. And then, you know, fast forward a few months later, a client calls, and he's like, I just want to thank you for all your years of service. It's been great getting to know you. And I'm like, thank you. It's been great knowing you too. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, why are you saying that? And he's like, oh, Jim called us this weekend and told us that you wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and that you weren't going to be working here anymore. And I remember being like, oh, it was like I wanted to die. Like, I was so sick. I had this small child at home. I'm trying to build a business, and he had literally gone in and called multiple of our like very good clients, some of which that I had brought in myself, and said that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. And I just remember being like, what do I even do right now? And so luckily, like, my sister is an attorney, contract attorney, and she was able to help me read our teaming agreement, and I was able to negotiate myself out of the team. But then it was like a sink or swim moment for me, because it was like, okay, you're on your own. Like, and we talk about equity, like how you get compensated. When I was in the team, it was like, okay, for every dollar that we bring in, you get 30 cents and I get 70. Like, for the partner got 70 and I only got 30. And I was really scared to be on my own, but I got $1, you know? So like, as an advisor, unless you're in this teaming agreement, you could be a Martian and still get the $1. You know, there's no man, woman, any kind of differentiator there. So I remember telling my women business friends what was going on, and they were like, I don't know if we can say bad words, but they were like, hell no! Like, what do you need? What do we, like, we'll introduce you to people, we'll bring our accounts to you, we'll help you. And that next year, I ended up being one of the top asset gatherers at my firm. And I remember, this was the best, I got to sit on a panel like this with him in the audience and give him advice on how to grow his business, because the other advisors had to be there. Very nice.
Cathryn, have you ever faced any adversity?
Yes, I have. I will say, like, graduating school and being, 22 and going into the Philadelphia Eagles premium sales office was definitely intimidating. It's 12 guys, there's 3 women in there, and they're all on the service side, so coming in fresh like that, so young, like, having to sell and prove to these guys that I can do it was definitely intimidating. But I think one of the things that, like, We both went to the Mount. My rowing coach always taught me was fake the confidence. I had no idea what I was doing, but I would pick up the phone, figure out the seating locations. I would figure it out, and I would sell the seat and send it along to them, and they would see it. Secondly, like when I transitioned full time, there was a few times where I work with the corporate sales team at the Eagles, where my job is to generate leads, their job's to generate leads. Sometimes I'm not taken as seriously as they are until I bring like a big fish to the pot, I would say. Maybe that's not the saying, but we have auctions through the foundation where we raise funds, so we're allowed to auction off autographed jerseys, autographed footballs, and with the events that I do, we get a lot of like high clientele donors to come out to them. I met a guy at Baird Country Music Festival who owns a large company. He ended up coming on board later on in the season as a Eagles Autism Challenge sponsor, a alternative sponsor, so that's $50,000, I would say. I then brought him to our corporate team and my counterpart in the sales team to kind of say, hey, let's make a deck, let's pitch this guy like a $250,000 deal. In the meeting, my counterpart didn't really take it seriously in the moment, so I carried that relationship on. But there were definitely times where, you know, as a young female going into big offices and there's older men there, it's super intimidating, and sometimes it's troubling for them to take me seriously. But turn around now, this guy has a corporate partnership with the Eagles. Like, I brought in this money, not my counterpart. So I would say just like being persistent and carrying on those relationships, and honestly faking the confidence works 99.9% of the time.
Yeah, I want to talk about faking the confidence and the feeling inside when you feel under a microscope, that you know that microscope is not being shown onto your male colleagues. And I used to say, years and years ago, I used to say, well, we have to do it better and faster and smarter and look better doing it. But how do you like put that inside when you know that you're under a microscope, you already know that you're doing it better than your male colleague? Like, what are the thoughts? Talk about the faking the confidence, or talk about really stepping into your power. Any of you can take this.
Well, for me, I'm going to be honest, the first thing I do is pray.
Amen.
Okay? I'm very honest with you, because, and another thing what I do is I make sure I'm prepared. Okay, once I'm prepared, and I finish my prayer, I know I can accomplish anything. So I may go in initially nervous, but once I say my prayer and I know I'm prepared, that calms me. That calms me. And also I believe that no one in the room is better than I am. Okay? I have some knowledge that someone else may not have. So that gives me the confidence to walk into the room. You know, initial nervousness, but then I know there's no one in the room that's better than I, that's more qualified or better than I am. And that calms me down.
Yeah, Nikki, you want to talk about that? And talk about dismissing the doubting voice and focusing on your power.
Well, when I was homeless and went to live with my grandmother, I got off the Greyhound bus and my grandmother looked at me and she made sure that I was okay. And she said, Nikki, you're fortunate enough to be born to the greatest generation of women that have ever lived. What are you going to do with it? I was 10. I was like, oh no. That seemed very deep. But, you know, she would tell me that I was destined for greatness. And when I was younger, I didn't believe that. That's kind of like, you know, your parents telling you you're pretty. But as I've gotten older and more experienced, when I have those moments of doubt, I still hear my grandmother's voice tell me that I'm destined for greatness. And being prepared and understanding what I bring to the table, but also not being afraid of things not working out. I'm at the point in life where some things just aren't from me. And so what feels like rejection can be God's protection. And so if I don't get something, then it wasn't for me. You know, my motto is, I might not be your cup of tea, but that doesn't mean that I'm not some hot tea. So, and leaning into that. I'm also a former pageant girl. I was a Miss Pennsylvania. And if you have to get on stage in a bathing suit and have somebody give you a score, there's pretty much nothing you can't do and deal with in life. But, I come in prepared. I know what I bring to the table. I can articulate what my value is. And if you don't understand what my value is, then maybe we shouldn't just do business. And I'm gonna kind of go on with the next thing. I don't feel that all the time, but that's become more and more of how I walk in the world. And you know what? People really do kind of reflect that energy, because I have confidence, and that instills confidence in me and other people. And if they don't get it, then they're just wrong.
I have more questions, but I know I don't want to run out of time before we have questions from the audience. Does anybody have questions? No? Hold on, I got it.
Oh, hello. How are you, Tracy?
Hi, Tracy. This is for any of the women up there. Double glass ceiling. Experiences with double glass ceiling and how you have overcome them, or still, work your way through them now.
For people who don't know, talk about what that is.
The double glass ceiling, for example, I'll take Nikki. Nikki is an African American woman, an accomplished tax attorney, and there could be a white woman, an accomplished tax attorney, and a white man, an accomplished tax attorney. And so there are two spaces that Nikki has to navigate.
Yeah.
So I understand that that's the reality. I know that some people, and I'm actually really glad that you asked the question, because I think the country is grappling with this, especially with the advent of the attack on DEI programs. But, here's the thing. I think that success for us, the fundamentals don't look different for you because you're a woman or because you're a person of color. I think that you have to have them even more, and I think you have to articulate them. But I also think you have to live in the reality that that's the case. I understand that when I walk into a room and I'm the only black person, that I'm going to be asked about my credentials. I've had people call my university to make sure that I have the credentials that I say that I do. Is it right? No. Is it fair? No. But you know what? Let them waste their time. Let them. Because they're going to be told that I have my JD, MBA, LLM, and tax. So I come locked and loaded, and I can also articulate what I bring to the table. And it's really not my race. I think my life experience and my ability to lean into that life experience makes me realize that, one, I can talk to the homeless man on the street, to the CEO, and I understand that fundamentally what everyone is looking for is to feel like they're heard, important, and respected. But yes, there is absolutely a double glass ceiling. It is something that you are going to have to navigate it. But the one thing I would say is don't fall into the trap of taking yourself out of contention because you think that someone's going to possibly reject you. And I see that so many times because we don't necessarily know how to navigate those spaces. But this is why these conversations are important. You don't have to do it yourself. And so many of us have experienced this. So one of the things that I'm a huge proponent of is I have a network of other women of color that I can go to, that I can talk about the issues that I may be dealing with. Tell them and get their advice. How have you navigated it? And sometimes understanding you can't navigate it. Some people don't want to have their minds changed. Some people believe what they want to believe, even though it's not factually based. And then you have to make a decision. Do you want to move forward and fight for something? Or do you want to go on and use it as an opportunity to jump into something better? it depends on what your circumstances, but I do say stay ready, have your resume ready, have your money right, because then you can have a lot more choices in the world. Because guess what? I don't want to be dependent upon anybody to decide how I'm going to pay my mortgage or how I'm going to live. Like, I had too much of that when I was a child. And so it's not a poverty mindset, but it is I live in reality. But the double, that double glass ceiling is something that's true that we do have to deal with, and I would be remiss in lying if I said that it wasn't.
And Brenda, you talk a lot too about no, now what, and don't get stuck, don't tell yourself you're stuck just because you're hitting something.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And also, just to piggyback on Nikki, the one thing that, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, that I would tell my younger self is make sure throughout your career and throughout your life, you have a mentor, you have an advocate, right? And you have a sponsor. Okay? The mentor, someone you can talk to, bounce ideas off of. The advocate will speak for you when you're not in the room. The sponsor will call in some chips to help you either get promoted or get around that glass ceiling. That's the one thing I didn't learn when I was younger. Because I think I would have been further along if I had those three in my corner as part of my network. So that is very important to have. A mentor, an advocate, and a sponsor.
And it can be that, and that can be that white guy, because I have some white guys and some white women that will go to war for me, and sometimes you will get, people will push you off to a person of color. No, but sometimes the people of color, they feel like their position is more precarious, and so they're not necessarily going to call in a chip for you. It's more important that somebody rocks with who you are and they're invested in you and they see your talent, and sometimes somebody who looks like you may see you as competition, and you have to learn the discernment of that. But if you have like that white guy who's like, that's my person, stick close to them, because they will be your sponsor and they will be your advocate in the room, and they will be listened to more. So realize what the reality is and navigate within it. And once you have some power, try to change that. But sometimes you do have to live within the confines of how things are.
Kristin, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh boy. I think I would tell myself that I didn't need to put so much pressure on myself. But like, I guess I am the age that I am and I still put a lot of pressure on myself. In my industry, there wasn't, like I said, a very good boundary set. It wasn't like you have this many PTO days, you have this much vacation time. And I still struggle with that, like taking vacation and doing the things. I mean, I'm sick right now because I've been burning the candle at both ends for about a month now, doing all good, amazing things. So I would just say be gentle with yourself. Push yourself when you need to, but also remember that you have to be healthy. That's a key part of it.
All the way around healthy. Cathryn, you want to talk about your advice to your younger self?
Yes, I would say I was actually speaking with Ryan Hammond, the executive director, on my one-on-one with her this month, as I do with my manager. But she was like, I was going to Japan, and I was like, I am so young. I feel like I'm not as accomplished here. I'm still learning from all of you. And she was like, you have to give yourself credit. So I would say, you're gonna figure it out. Even if in the moment, it doesn't seem like it, you will. And then secondly, I would say, have an open mind to anything. I was not set to work at the Eagles, May of my senior year. It literally happened in the span of 2 weeks, and I never thought I'd be working for a nonprofit. So say yes to the interview, I would say, always, because you never know what's gonna come from it.
Ladies, thank you so much. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap up? Any final questions for the, stand by. Stand by.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cherie Crosby Weeks, and I'm always curious because, as women, we are pressured all the time, but there's one thing that we must keep, which is our joy. So my question is, what is your joy space? And what do you cling to when all those naysayers, the double glass ceiling, the no's, the nays, hit you, but you keep yourself looking beautiful because you have joy within your heart?
I can say that, you know, on a team of all women working for a nonprofit of an NFL team, I can say looking back at all of the hard work that we do throughout the year and having a team that has my back and I have theirs, like, is really good to know. But then on a larger scale, I would say, like, it's definitely a unique situation and circumstance, but seeing 85,000 people come together on Sundays and rooting for all the same thing is really what it's about. So that's what I always look to.
For me, my joy is realizing that my grandmother's parents were sharecroppers, and I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, and that I have privilege to have some of the issues that I get to have. My grandmother worked as a domestic. My mother was a drug addict. I was sleeping on the sidewalk. Now I live a fabulous life. When we were homeless, I used to go to the library and read about art and travel. I've been to Paris 4 times. And in September, I bought a beach house. And so that joy comes from my family, my friends, the family that I meet that I wasn't necessarily born into, and that I became the kind of woman that I wanted to be when I was that 9-year-old little girl living in that homeless shelter. And that's an incredible gift. So keep going, keep dreaming. No matter what has gotten in your way, tomorrow's a new day. Doesn't matter where you come from, you get to decide who you want to be and what kind of life you want to have. And that freedom gives me so much joy, and that God has blessed me. For a long time I was challenged, and I used to say, why did my family go through what it did? Why me? Especially after my brother died a few years ago. And the answer that came back to me was, why not my family? Nobody's family deserves to go through that. And that maybe it happened because I was going to use this experience to be my platform and to advocate for people who couldn't advocate for themselves. And in that way, that feels like a blessing, and that's where my joy comes from.
For me, my joy is knowing that I am enough. And no matter what I do, or what circumstance that I am in, I am enough. And to know that I am enough does bring joy to my heart. I also demonstrate that with my family. I have 9 grandkids. I'm a first generation going to school, and they have seen me excel through education, through the technology industry, and also I've started a business, and I was in business for 30 years, over 30 years in technology. So by me being an example to them, to know when they see me, they see joy, they know I work hard, they know I've had many obstacles in my life, but to me, showing them and showing others, also giving back, that brings joy to my heart.
Kristin?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I love, like, what brings me joy is giving back to my community. My job gives me joy every single day. I talk to clients and they're like, I don't think I would have been able to do this without you. And going back to that math problem that I was talking about in my MBA, like, what better gift is there to be able to have somebody save enough to be able to go to college, or to retire, or to buy a beach house, or whatever it might be. Like, I'm like a little joy fairy with finance. Like, it feels so good. And I would also say that extend that giving back to all areas of your life. So with my children's school, they're constantly giving back. And give back to one another, because we talked about mentors and advocates and supporters. We talked about age and whether we're too old or too young or whatever. You're never too young to give back to someone else, and it just feels so good. Because we all do need to work together. Male-dominated and double glass ceiling and all of these things. There's not a lot of female financial advisors. There's not a lot of women of color that are financial advisors. And my firm is probably, of any firm that I know of, dedicated in a real way to bringing young women into this business, because it's an amazing business and people want to do business that they feel like they can connect with. So if someone that, if they want to deal with someone that they see that looks like them or acts like them, that's what everyone in this room needs to do, is to change this going forward. So that's what brings me joy. And I should say my husband and my kids. And my dog.
Thank you all so much. Please thank them. All of you for sharing so authentically. They're all the real deal. Kelly? Yes, thank you all so much for being here and for coming out. I just want to take a minute to thank our panelists, our moderator, Tracy, Brenda, Nikki, Cathryn, and Kristin. They were truly taking time out of their workday to be here. And it's really important for us to remember women need to support women. So this is what this is all about. We have some refreshments for you to enjoy. Please take a minute to say hi to these women and have a quick conversation with them. They're going to stick around for a little bit. And continue to build conversations with each other so that all women can thrive in any industry that they're in. Thank you so much.